just to confuse you from the thumbnail, Apple's also been doing this since the iPhone 2G through 3GS. Technically. Anyway. Apple has done this thing that the thumbnail's about. That I'm just going to call it the... Because you guys mainly know this by the 5C, and 5S, and 10R, 10, and 10S. Well, here's the thing. It goes way back to the 3G and 2G and 3GS. I'm going to call it the 2G. You guys might get mad at me, but I'm not going to call it the original iPhone because that's just too much to say. Anyway, so what I mean by that is because, so the iPhone 2G was announced in January. It wasn't released till June, and so it had a whole year to do that. But you know, nowadays they usually when they come out with a new iPhone, they'll price the older one at a lower price, mainly, except for I'll get to that in a minute. But here's the thing. If they would have kept the 2G around when the 3G was there, it would have been really bad because the 2G would have costed the same amount the 3G did to make because of the design. The design was plastic on the 3G, making it so it was less money. So that actually the 2G and the 3G would be costed about $200, but the 3G is just technically better altogether. So that's why they didn't keep the 2G around, which is like what they'd done in previous years, except for and then, so when the 3GS came out, they kept the 3G because they were much different. So that's what, I would say the 3GS is the 10S, the 3G is the 10R, and the 2G is the 10, or whatever, just to help you think that. They didn't do this sort of technique for a few years, and when they did, they tweaked it a little bit when the 5S was released, they got rid of the iPhone 5 off their lineup and added a 5C, which was really bad because if they would have just kept the 5 around, yeah, it will look the same, but at the same time, it would still cost the $550, and then the 5S would cost the $650, but since they made it a plastic design, they still cost it at $550. They should have lowered the price because plastic's a lot cheaper, so it should have been $450, but I see that they wouldn't have done that because the 4S was at $450. But I still think they could have done better with that. Maybe change their pricing, because they always have a thing where some phones at $450 and $650, back in the day anyway. They also didn't, and then you might say, okay, well then they probably did this again with the 10S and stuff, but they actually did it once before that, and that's with the SE and the 6 and the 7. So when you see the SE's released, you can think the SE replaced the 5S, but no. That's like saying that that's like saying that 5C replaced the iPhone 4. It's just because the iPhone 4 was old, so they got rid of it out of its lineup. The 5S was old, they got rid of it out of its lineup. It wasn't replaced. What the SE did replace was the 6, and you'd be like, oh no, when the SE was first released, the 6 was with it. But technically, they did this a little different. Let's say the SE was released when the 7 came out. Then the 6S the 6 would have been out of its lineup. It's because the SE replaced the 6 with better features. And yeah, it's a little bit smaller, but that's exactly what it is. It's a little worse, but has some better features. I wouldn't say the 10R by any means is better than the iPhone 10. So, it's the design. And yeah, it's better. And so, that's what they did then. And then they did, the 10. It was really close to the 10S. And here's the thing. The reason why they had the 5C is because the 5 and 5S were so similar. They didn't have the SE. That SE was kind of a little slim. They only had Touch ID. That was about all that was different in the chip. So they're just go for the last year's models. It looks the same. It is the same. But that's why they replaced it. But with the iPhone 10, the 10S was even worse. It had even less similarity, difference from the 10 to the 10S. So they had to replace the 10, giving it the 10R. The 10R replaced the 10, making it better in some ways, but losing the better things about it. Like the display and the extra telephoto camera. You get the A12 chip and... just the A12 chip. And better battery life. And haptic touch. Haptic touch. And then they did this again with the iPhone 11. The iPhone 11 replaced the XS, and then they came out with the 11 Pro to keep all the better things if you want the better display. And so that the 11 had the dual camera. That's what they did. And then they did it again with the SE, except for it was a little different because the SE was supposed to replace the XR then, but it didn't. So that's kind of weird. So that actually did replace the 8, even though the 8 was old anyway. It was just kind of both. They just, yeah, it's weird. And then they did this again with the 11. The 11 replaced the iPhone 12, replaced the 11 Pro, and then they just came out with the 12 Pro to be the flagship best ever. Anyway, this was a long video, but I gotta just get that to know, so that probably, so the iPhone 13 will replace the 12 Pro, and then there'll just be a 13 Pro. Like, they'll just do that. Like, they do this for years, and now they're just doing it every year now. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And in a few weeks, we'll have a 12 Pro video.